This happened back in elementary school. I was around 7 to 8. I haven't thought about it too much in the past few years, but reading through this sub makes me think about this. However, at school there was always an annual Halloween party where brothers and sisters of my elementary school mates were invited. We always had lots of fun, eat spooky snacks, etc. I was wearing a vampire costume. I always wore vampire costumes at Halloween, and my best friend Sarah at the time had a strange costume that involved some fake plastic chains but seemed real because quite heavy. Sarah tells me she had to go to the bathroom, so we both head to the bathroom. I wait for her outside of the entrance. Another couple of girls went into the bathroom but did not pay much attention to that. But a few minutes later, I started getting very annoyed because I didn't want to lose the party. Over 5 minutes, I was pissed off. I turned around and entered in the bathroom. I heard the sounds of the chains moving around, but I can't really tell from which bathroom it came from. So I knocked on every door, no responses. I get to the ground and look through the spot between the door and the floor to understand where the noise was coming from, and I find it. Strangely, I see that she isn't alone in the bathroom. I raise my voice and ask if she's okay, and who was that girl? No response. I start trying the door, but it was locked. I start panicking and screaming, and after I tried with all the force I had, I couldn't get it open. From now, I have some confused memories, but I will try to explain it the best I can. I see a girl, and I knew her. She was the teenage sister of one of my classmates. I asked her what was happening, and she told me that Sarah was having some problems and she was helping her, but I didn't hear Sarah anymore. I kicked her ankle and managed to get into the bathroom. I was scared as hell, and I just wanted my friend back. As I went into the bathroom and she closed it again, using her back to keep it closed. I look at Sarah, and she was sitting on the toilet with her face red and chains on her neck. She was slowly choking. I began to scream and slapped that girl, and then she slapped me. I was sobbing, crying, and basically I wasn't able to move because of the fear. All I could do was scream as loud as I possible can. A teacher finally arrives and gets me and Sarah out of the bathroom, calls our parents and calls an ambulance. My parents bring me and Sarah home to the hospital. Turns out that her brother, our classmate, was pissed off by her, and she decided to do something about it. She was a lot older than us at the time, but I still get chills thinking about it to this day. I've never seen cops talk to my parents or at school, so I guess she just got away with it. Me and Sarah never talked about it again, and when I tried to ask her what happened, she doesn't want to talk about it. My dad had taken me trick-or-treating around our suburban neighbourhood on Halloween of 2010. We were passing between two homes with garages and faced onto our streets. They were corner homes. For a bit of context, I can't exactly remember my age at the time. I was probably about 7. These houses that we passed were known for giving out the best candy and having the coolest costumes. I knew them as the scary houses. Being the whimper that I was, I kept my head down and tried to scurry past them, knowing that they wouldn't to scare me. When I walked far enough, I turned around to see my dad laughing. "You can come back, sweetie, it's okay," he said. Everyone was looking at me. Then I noticed a guy standing behind my dad. He didn't have any skin, he was all muscle, dripping blood all over the concrete. It was Halloween, so I thought it was just a costume. Then he walked through my dad like a ghost falling through a wall, as if he wasn't even there. My dad was confused and he saw my face twist into a pure horror. I quickly turned and ran as fast as my little legs could carry me. In cliche fashion, I tripped as I was running. I shoved my candy back into my bucket along with the grass and dirt from a neighbour's yard because I was shoveling so fast. Then I got on my feet and bolted to the house. When we got home, I locked every single door and window. I started crying. My poor father was still outside. I remember talking to my mum and her calming me down after that. She went my dad back in. When I mentioned it to him, he said he hadn't seen anything and looked generally concerned. I never saw that Max man skinned man today. I never saw him again after this. It creeped me out. Was I experiencing something paranormal? Or was something really off? This encounter took place in 2010 on Halloween. I was a sophomore in high school. Not really at that age to party. Well, for me anyway. And not really at the age that I wanted to sit at home with my parents all night handing out candy because I was too old for trick-or-treating. That day at school, a group of 5 or 6 friends and I had decided to make plans to roam around the city, wreaking havoc for doing typical 16-year-old Halloween stuff. It started out pretty chill. We got ready, dressed up in our Halloween costumes, and we didn't have one planned out. But I was a bit of a wimp at the time, so I winged it. I wore some purple pants, a rainbow bandana, hippie style, and every other colour accessory you can imagine, until ultimately I was a rainbow. During our first adventure, we went to Target to walk around and show off all of our costumes. I remember distinctly this lady walked up to us, who didn't give me any bad vibes, and told us all this crazy crap. We talked to her about how we were going to play with my Ouija board, Target cards, and all that stuff. Her mood instantly changed from friendly to taken aback, almost like she was wanted to run away. She told us she had twin sister and felt very strange. She told us not to mess with the unknown, because her sister was fat psychic and just knew things. Didn't think much of the encounter with a random stranger on Halloween at Target. We did play the Ouija board anyway, but no, we either got possessed or had a creepy encounter with a demon. That is where the encounter comes into play. It was dark. We were bored, 5 of us. We were in a small room where my parents were. We had more of a chance getting somewhere excitement by walking around the neighbourhood on Halloween than sitting in my room playing board games. We walked around even trick-or-treating a little bit. It was lots of fun until we passed a large dimly lit vacant parking lot. It was vacant, but all but one van just stood there facing the street. This time I got bad vibes as we walked by. Just as we were passing, the window rolled down. Some of us looked back, and some of us kept walking. I stopped and looked back, but it was just so dark, and all I could see was a faint glow of a cigarette. For some reason, what he said will stick with me forever. She said in a deep raspy voice, she with a grain of salt, I think it was a she, "Hey kids, wanna come here for some candy?" I don't get a lot of kids where I'm from. Luckily, I was close enough to home at this point where I could have gotten there quick if I needed to, and that's exactly what all of us did. I'm really against judging people, but I also like to look out for myself and my friends. Maybe it was an innocent old lady who wanted to hand out candy, or, the most likely thing, she wanted to kidnap us. I live in an old, tiny, 3-bedroom house in a community after my parents gave me this old house. I asked my fiancée and stepbrother to move in to help with costs. My fiancée and SB, without fail, every day to my annoyance, would lock the doors and windows to the house. Every single one. My family had lived in that house since it was built in the early 60s, and never once was the back door locked. Eventually I adapted and started locking the windows and doors before bed as part of our family household bedtime routine. We became a little family, with our 2 fat cats and a round of a husky puppy. Halloween rolls around. It was uneventful. We handed out candy and watched movies. We all had work the next day, so after the windows / door check, fiancé and I go to our room with the puppy, and SB goes to his room with the cats. Everything was completely normal and within routine. The puppy was 6 months old and very large. He'd always sleep beside our bed on the floor. In the middle of the night, around 3 AM to be specific, the puppy starts crying. My fiancée woke up first. Since that was her side of the bed, and got up to take the puppies for a pee. They came back in, but puppy was still crying. And these aren't soft little doggo sounds. They were getting louder and more panicked as the time went on. So I get up and offered to take puppy out again. My fiancée grumpily said no. And puppy was stopped whining and runs off to the living room. Could hear him hop on the old sofa, and with the house falling quiet again, we drift back up to sleep. 20 minutes later, we're woken by the sounds of our puppy screaming again. It literally sounded like someone was beating the crap out of puppy. My fiancée and SB both ran to the living room and found puppy hiding beneath our coffee table, cowering and screaming as if someone was whimpering him. The guys do their door window check. Everything was good. They put away their nightlight weapons of choice. Well, over coffee the next day at breakfast, we began discussing what happened. SB tells us he woke up shortly before we did and heard puppy when he was starting to whine. He woke up while heard someone stomping through the house, and he implied our arguing had woken him up, and that fiancé stomping and slamming stuff was not cool, and likely why the puppy was freaking out. We gave him a weird look and explained we weren't awake at the time, and after some questioning he said it sounded like someone was wearing boots, work boots, and digging around in the kitchen. When I was 16, on Halloween night of 2008, my mum and dad told me to stay at home and give out candy. This didn't really bother me that much, because Halloween wasn't my favourite holiday, and I had nothing planned with friends or anything, so I was more than up to the task. I was just watching movies on TV. Then I heard the doorbell ring, and some weird-looking, sketchy 50-year-old man, well, that's what I could tell. This man was in a Michael Myers costume, and he said trick or treat, in like a very deep voice. And to this day, I still don't know what he wanted, but I just gave him his sweets and shut the door without saying another word. I went back to my movie, and then after 15 minutes, the doorbell rang again. I sighed and I looked through the window, and it was the same guy from earlier. And he saw the windows open and he turned to look at me. I shut the blinds as fast as I could, but I think I was a bit too late. I just remembered I unlocked the back door was unlocked, so I ran to get it, but I already heard the door opening. I thought to myself, how would he get there so quick? I ran up to my bedroom and shut the door as quietly as I could, but the man ran up the stairs as fast as he could, and he tried to open the door, but I managed to lock it before he managed to get to the door. I was in my room, there was nothing I could use to defend myself. But then I had an idea. It was a long shot, but it's the only one I had. I pulled up YouTube, I connected to my speaker that was nearby, and I pulled up gunshot sounds on YouTube, and then I turned the volume up as loud as I could, and then I played the video. And then the first gunshot fired, and then I said, Galville, that was just a warning shot. Galville, the next one's in your head. It worked. He ran off without any hesitation, and the front door was open. It was unlocked. I must have forgot to unlock it. I didn't call the police. I just managed to keep this to myself all these years, but I just can't keep it to myself anymore. But I never saw that man again. After nearly 10 years, I never saw him again, and hopefully, I never will. It was just this past Halloween, and I went to the mall with some friends after school. We were a group of 8 senior guys, but decided to go trick-or-treating for the last time, before it became questionable. Hell, it seemed more questionable now, seeing 6-foot guys walking around in pirate costumes, but hey, we might as well have some fun, right? We went into the mall to find it empty for a bit, and soon the mall got more and more full with mums and their kids or trick-or-treating to the different stores. Before we left, we all got a quick bite to eat from the food court before we went trick-or-treating. Our plan of going in about Halloween was not traditional, though in a nutshell we would be in my friend's car and we would be driving up and down neighbourhoods with the Take One bowls and dumping them in pillowcases or trash bags. Before we left, we went on our way to the exit when a massive urge to take a poo after all I ate some tacos from Taco Bell, and I don't know how I didn't expect this coming. I told them to go ahead while I would catch up with them. I was staring to sweet from the urge to go, and I went pretty deep into the mall to find a restroom, finding the sign saying restrooms in a long white hallway. Now, without thinking, I ran into the first restroom. I saw and went straight to the stalls. I can remember feeling relief as I went in and sat down ready to do my business. Right before I was about to, however, I heard this old raspy voice saying, "Son, I think you're in the wrong restroom," and I froze. I let out a somewhat choked, "What?" The old raspy voice showed who he was as he bent down to tell me, "You're in the girls' restroom, son." He let out somewhat of a twisted giggle or cackle. I can remember his face clearly, old and wrinkled, white tannish skin, white hair with round framed glasses. That made him a bit of psychotic. I was frozen, no, in complete shock as horror as I sat there, looking in this man who was in the girls' restroom for God knows why. We both stared into each other's eyes for God knows how long. The old man broke the silence by saying, "You know what? I'm going to pay you a visit." He said this long ear-to-ear grin with only his lips and was beginning to cackle more before his brown and rotten teeth. I nearly felt sick by the sight of this. I didn't know what to do. But before I could do anything, I knew it was time to get out of there. All I can remember before I took off was seeing him starting to crawl under the stool to me. I sat up, not zipping my pants or putting on my belt, just pulling them up and ran. I dashed out of there as fast as I could, looking like I just had my pants. As I was running out of the hallway, I looked back and saw an old man sprint out. He was about 6'3" and was wearing an overall jacket with black tan pants and construction boots. I kept booking it all the way until I was out that mall. I see my friends in their car waiting for me. I ran up to my friend's Fox car and I was shaking as I put my seatbelt on. He asked me what was wrong. I told him in a stern voice to stop the car. My friend Scarlett was sat right next to me asking why, but I cut him off, raising my voice higher. "Fox, we gotta go, now." Fox started the car and we went out of there as fast as we could. I didn't bother looking back. I had some weird encounters with some people, some weirder than others, but I never thought that one of these days I would find myself in that position of being face to face with a deranged person in a restroom. I haven't seen him since, not that I would want to. I just prayed that he left the mall as soon as I did. What still keeps me up at night, however, is why. Why was he in the girls' room in the first place? The neighbourhood that I lived in was super kid friendly. There was lots of families outside in the afternoons to just chat and let the kids out the house. The neighbourhood was very safe, so many times our parents would just leave us outside with the neighbours' kids, so no adults would be watching us like in the older kids, 8th graders to be precise. It had just been like that until the summer before I was going to become a 6th grader. My friend and I were playing outside around 3 or 4 p.m. and many people were not out yet, so it was just us. Okay, basically she was the eldest. She was in the 7th grade and the rest were kindergartens, 2nd graders, so she had to look after us. This was our first encounter with the man in the green car. We noticed that this car kept circling around the neighbourhood, and then there was a big golden car parked that was right in front of where we were all hanging out. He basically double parked next to it so that we wouldn't be able to see him, but he was able to see us. My friend's grandma came out to check on us, and then she noticed the car but didn't give him much thought. A few minutes passed and she came back out and was pouring water into the sewage. She saw the man and told us to get into the house. She even told me not to go home, even though I live right next door. She just rushed me inside. I was scared. She told me not to go home yet and to stay here until my grandma picked me up. She said there was a man just watching us. She had never seen him before. Anyone in our neighbourhood knows each other. It's uncommon to see someone new. At first she thought he was just picking up someone, but it was very too long, and he was creepily watching over us, and so she locked the doors on my friend, and I decided to peep through the window. The car waited for a couple of minutes and then came back after a couple of minutes, and then finally left. My friend and I was like, what the hell was that? But we just went to the basement to pray. The next day everyone was outside. It was sunny and windy. All the kids were out, even the older kids. But the green car came back. This time I clearly saw his face. He looked Asian, long hair, and looked like he was in his mid-30s, and he looked directly at me. My blood ran cold. I told my grandma, and she told me not to worry because there were lots of people outside. I told her he was here yesterday too, and that's when she was like, what the hell? She was going to confront him, but I told her not to because he seems like a psycho and he could barely walk. Plus, there were people outside who were suspicious of this dude too. So we just went all back home. It's happened lots of times, but I don't remember a lot of things because it's been years. This guy's never really done anything but just stare at me for hours. But the thing that struck me, kind of funny though, that was that he would be always in disguise. Like he would try to change some part of his look so that we wouldn't notice or that it's the same person. For example, he would dress up having a fake mustache. I'm not stupid though. The last time I saw him was actually when I was walking to a Halloween party with my sister. The thing was, I was telling her the story about the man in the green car who kept stalking me. Then bam, the green car pulled up right next to me to the sidewalk. When I was crossing the street, I told my sister that was the car. That was the guy. Oh my god, I literally got goosebumps. But that was the last time, unless he got a new car or something. But to this day, I still don't know what he wanted, or why was he stalking me in the first place. But I feel like that question will never be unanswered. This happened when I was 10. It was Halloween night, and to make things even better, it fell on a year on a Friday. I was trick-or-treating with my mum and a friend of mine, who I just called Jane, and both her mum and my mum. Jane was dressed as a birthday present. I was Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz. I was around 9 PM, and Jane and I collected mountains of candy to the point where our arms would begin to hurt from carrying the bags. During the trek, we came to a hill in our neighbourhood there was no houses until you get to the top. I was determined to increase my candy intake as fast as possible, so I started sprinting to the top of the hill, leaving Jane and our parents behind. When I got to the top, I heard my mum and Jane yell for me to wait for them. I was impatient, but I did anyway. About that time, a black car pulled up right next to me. I can't remember what type of car it was, but I think it was either a Volvo or a Honda. A guy who looked like he was in late 20s, early 30s, rolled the window down and said hello to me. He looked the friendly type, so I happily said hello back. He asked me, have you gotten a lot of candy tonight? I responded, yep, and happily showed him my overflowing bag. He smiled, he's like, that's awesome. Can you come here and then I'll give you some more candy? That's when I froze. My parents were the kind of people who drilled danger warnings into your head, and this guy may not seem like it, but all signs seem to be there. Even my 10-year-old mind could see that. At the point, I really had no idea what to do. I guess the guy saw my face. I only wanted a little candy, I said. You don't need to give me the whole bag, he said. I noticed someone in the passenger seat leaned forward to look at me as well, and both had creepy smiles on their faces. I comprehended whenever I should run or not. Luckily about that time my mother came running up up the hill, and having seen me what I was doing, the guy saw her too and his face turned white. "I gotta go," he said, staring at my mum the whole time, and followed the car down the road. My mum ran up to me and threw her arms around me, starting to cry. When Jane and her mum finally caught up, we all walked back to the house. I was clinging onto my mum's arm the whole time. A bag of candy was eventually able to take my mind off the situation, but I'll occasionally look back on this nowadays and can't help but wonder what could have happened to me if I had gone up to that guy's car, and thank God I was smart enough not to. So creepy Halloween guy. Let's not meet again. When I was about 11, I was getting candy with friends on Halloween. It started getting pretty late, so we all decided to split up and go home. I was going down this one street that was really dark, and this dude came out of his house as I was passing by, and I heard, "Hey, I could use your help." I usually always willing to help, and I didn't stop to think that maybe this wasn't such a great idea to stop and help a completely random stranger in the dark. So I stopped and waited for him to approach me, and he said, "Can you please get in my car and start it for me while I look at the engine?" And he had a really weird look on his face as I ended up getting really bad vibes and said, "I actually really gotta get home." I could barely finish my sentence before he said, "Oh, it's okay, you don't have to go home. I'm a nice guy and just need help. Please get out of my car and help me. I'll give you lots of candy for your help." I started backing away, and every time I stepped back, he stepped closer. My heart was racing. He didn't necessarily do anything bad at all, but it was just the way he was talking to me and approaching me that I'm standing too close for comfort. I remember saying, "I really have to get back home. I'm sorry," and started walking really fast. And when I turned into the next block, I ran really quick. I still think about this all the time. I'm not totally sure what his intentions were. Maybe he genuinely needed help, but I had a feeling all over my body to just run. I was 14 at the time and was very awkward. I like to avoid confrontation, so I will say as little as possible to offend someone or make them upset with me. At the time, I was at a stupid Halloween party that was basically for adults and young 6 to 10-year-old kids. So I was extremely bored, and my mum said I was too old to trick-or-treating. So I just walked along with a group of adults and young kids in my costume. At one point, a 16-year-old guy was introduced to me as being the cool oldest kid of one of the ones my mum was talking to. You could tell by the way he talked and acted that there was something off with him, but I thought he was great at the time, that there was something closer to my age, so I ignored it. My mum suggested we split off from the group and to hang out, and I had a phone, so I agreed. Him and I were walking around the neighbourhood as he went door to door, awkwardly asking for candy, and stood back onto the sidewalk as I couldn't ask for candy. At one point during the night, I noticed something with him that was really off. He started asking me if I believed in vampires. I said yes because I was worried what his reaction would be if I said no. His eyes lit up and he was asking about him being a vampire and asking if I wanted to come back to his house so he could bite and suck my neck. I nervously laughed and said, "Oh no, I'm sorry, I have a boyfriend," and he wouldn't be comfortable with that. He replied with, "I have a girlfriend and she wouldn't mind. It's just stuck in your neck because my fangs get sore when I don't. Just come over." He knew I lived in the neighbourhood because everybody in the group did other than my family. Luckily, I didn't know how to say no. I kept politely declining him and the sun almost completely went down, so it was getting dark. I was getting scared of his presence and being alone with him. So I started blowing up my mum's phone with calls and started trying not to cry. She wasn't answering, so we wandered along the neighbourhood. By the grace of God, ran into the original group. I ran to my mum and hugged her while crying and being mad at her for not answering me because she left the front of the house. This may not seem creepy to any of you, but this guy was so persistent. I'm basically begging him to suck his neck. That's what really put me off. I didn't really do much Halloween activities after that, but after situations like that, would you? This is a short but personal story of mine. My dad was a huge Halloween freak. Every year we decorated that front porch like mad. Basically, it looked like a Halloween store butte in our yard. We had people hide in the bushes and ambush kids, that kind of thing too. After the night out was done, me and my dad would unplug everything and take things that could get stolen inside. We had this one Halloween prop that sat on the table on the front porch, next to our laughing skull. It was a pretty decent sized ball with an old hag head in it. It was motion activated, so no big deal, right? So of course it started making creepy noises and the old hag started talking when we walked to unplug it. It abruptly shut up and we took it inside. We take down more stuff, but I was right behind my dad as he walked by the thing's head. But I'm like magic, it starts making the creepy noise and the talking now. This thing is unplugged. The plug is off to the side of the ball. No outlet around, so no, it was not powered or battery operated. I seriously thought my dad was messing with me, but he looked just as confused as me. When he bent down to check it out, it once again abruptly stopped. He picked it up just to see if the off switch was set, and it was. Is it possible for leftover power to turn things back on, even if it has been unplugged for a while? I know that batteries can cause that, but this was electrically powered by a plug. I'm sure there was a logical explanation for that ball to talk again. But to this day, I still don't know if that was actually true, or is there something paranormal going on? That might seem a bit dramatic, but I can't think of any other explanation. But to this day, it still scares the crap out of me and my dad, and wondered, how did that thing turn on again? At the time this took place when I was 16 years old. I'm 25 now, but I'll do my best to explain the whole story as we go along. It was Halloween in my small south town. It was a crisp night, the temperature was in the mid-80s, and the heat showed no signs of slacking off. I was walking around with my older sister and our friend Brooke. My sister had gone as a cat, and Brooke has gone as a witch. I made the awful decision to wearing a formal gown since I decided to go as a zombie prom queen, and I had a crown and everything. I was drowning in that dress though. I was so hot and the closet back was restricting my breathing. It was about 8:40 and all the kids were pretty much cleared out the streets. We were making our way to the park next to City Hall where my mother was supposed to pick us up. We were supposed to be there for 9. The three of us were about 6 blocks away from at this point. My sister had stopped to talk to a friend of hers. I was not stopping now. It was close to time for my mum to pick us up. I was not going to be late. So I was miserable in that stupid dress, and I wanted to go home. I had carried on for about 2 blocks down before I noticed that my sister and my friend had stayed behind. I was annoyed to say the least. I also had 4 more blocks to go before I could lay down in that mother's minivan. Being alone in the dark was starting to give me the creeps. The yellow streetlights didn't do the ambience any favours. I kept my pace and kept walking until I heard the rumble of a muffler coming from behind me. I moved all the way off the road. A large black truck came past me very quickly and turned to the left in front of me. I passed the intersection and only had 3 more blocks left. Then I heard the truck again. I never moved back onto the road, so I didn't bother looking back. It wasn't too strange that the same truck had passed again. The third time they passed, they slowed to a good 30 seconds or so. That is what scared me. I didn't recognise the truck, and the windows were tinted heavily. As soon as I thought I could see a bit of their face, they peeled out and disappeared around the corner. I made another 2 blocks before I hit the truck again. I was 2 blocks away from my ride and I was scared to start running. I already couldn't breathe because of the dress, and I was terrified I would pass out. And as soon as I heard the truck, my stomach wrenched. I still kept walking, only a bit faster than I had been. I kept my eyes down and watched my own shadow as the headlights came closer. I heard the brakes and I made the decision to run, but I was too late. I realised how close they were to me. I felt a sharp pain in the back of my head, and I looked up to the best I could to see an arm sticking out to the window. An eagle crushing a sword was tattooed on his upper forearm. He had my hair wrapped around his fist. Before I could really comprehend the situation, he pumped the gas and he was dragging me along side of his truck. I was running as best as I could, clawing his arm. I was crying and screaming. The only thing that kept running through my mind was that if I tripped, I was going to be run over. That man was just laughing. I was completely helpless. As soon as he started to let go, I fell to my knees on my ass plant. I tore my dress, skinned my palms, and my skull was on fire. I was inconsolable as I was hyperventilating. I stood up and wiped my face, and then I looked around and felt absolutely violated. I looked back at the way I came from and realised that the man had dragged me by my head for a whole block and a half. Once I caught my head, I ran across the street to the park. My mother was nowhere to be seen. I climbed over the enclosed slide and I was curled up and cried. I don't know how long I was lying there before I heard my mother calling my name. I came out and she was walking up to the street calling for me. I walked over to her and she looked me up and down and started freaking out. Apparently, I had blood on my face and dress on my hands. She ran to me and was asking me what happened. I kept looking me up and down for a gas or something worse. I couldn't find my voice. I just held on to her and cried. We spent the next few hours at the police station filling in our report. Long story short, nothing ever came of it. My sister got in trouble with my parents for not being at City Hall on time. She was grounded and my mother asked we left City Hall to go and look after us. She found my sister where I left her, and my sister had even realised that I haven't stayed. I got into trouble for not staying with my sister, but I didn't get grounded. I'm still pretty mad that the dress was ruined and lost the damned crown. But I'm even angrier that man was never caught. For the past 16 years I lived in a very standard house for an average street in a boring neighbourhood. In the daytime it's quiet, there aren't many kids anymore, just empty nesters or the elderly. However, not very many kids meant that there still were some, and some went out at Halloween. I still go out. The pumpkins, the big spider webs, the blinding stroke lights, all of it. Then I sit on the porch, dress up as a spooky witch, and just wait. Now every single year, mostly back in my trick-or-treat years, I can recall a certain strangeness. There is without fail a man that walks the night silently, just as none other than Michael Myers. As in the Halloween slasher Michael Myers. Pretty harmless, but it is Halloween. It is scary. He never says a word, just walks silently with a long knife and glitches and catches the street lamps. In this year, 2016, I'm sitting in the dark on my porch. It's 2 hours in, I had straggled a total of 5 kids come through. I was about to give up, then behold Michael Myers makes his appearance. Quietly, he is walking past my house, thinking, dang, my porch light is off. He won't see me. But in that moment, he stops mid-stride and turns towards me, and then freezes. For what felt like ages, he stared at me in the dark, totally alone. Then he twitches his head and resumes his walk. The worst part is no one else seems to have any notice of this guy. Neither of my 2 brothers, not my best friend, no one. For 16 years, I had been the only one to see him. But the one thing I don't get is why did no one else see him? Is he just a figment of my imagination? Or Is he even real? Let me clarify, this happened during my college Halloween celebration a few years ago, and it is the most terrifying experience I've had. One of my roommates, some friends and I left to go to a party around dusk. We were all cataracted by the group of three drifters / homeless people. We thought nothing of it, and we went our merry way. About 4 hours later, we were going back to our apartment to change shoes, when one of the drifters cries to me, "Hey beautiful, how about a kiss?" Being a little tongue and sassy, I replied, no thanks, girls are more my type. To my shock and horror, he says, "Hey, my friend here is like the ladies." A homeless girl comes out of nowhere and proceeds to kiss me on the mouth. My friend picks me up and throws me on his shoulder. I proceed to flip the hell out in my apartment, shrugged it off, and ventured back out. Well, I got separated from my group in the crowd, then I see the three drifters again. I tried not to show that I'm shooting bricks when they asked me here where they can find the liquor store. I point down the street to the Kroger and then they say, "Okay, you can show us." I'm a small woman and they've shoved me into their vehicle. I think Nivri at the time, I think they will literally let me out at the grocery store, except it's closed because it's after midnight. I pleaded with them to let me out, but they kept saying the power does what it wants, and headed away from the safety of the campus area onto the freeway and out of the estate. For the next 4 hours I visited 3 states with them while pleading for my life. I'll never forget how they kept me saying the power does what it wants and talking about how they want to have fun with me. I kind of resigned myself to the fact that I was going to die, and I would never graduate college or see my family again. They pulled up at a gas station and I slipped out of the vehicle to be grabbed again, but I screamed my head off, but the crew came to help. That's when they talked about taking me to the cliff. I mentioned that my family's full of police officers and they're probably already looking for me now. They committed a crime and that I won't press charges if they take me back to campus. I guess that when a girl started to feel sorry for me because she started to say, "Guys, she's really scared, maybe we should just drop her off somewhere. She doesn't have to get any worse." They took me back to the campus area. As soon as the girl pulled me out of the car, a police officer called my name and the girl shoved me towards the cop and yelled, "The power does what it wants and tonight it will let you live." I've never been so happy to sit in a cruiser. They persuaded them, but I don't know if they were ever caught. My roommate dropped out of college and joined the military, and I transferred to another school. So, please be careful walking at night. Always keep your cell phone with you if possible and call the police if you see some suspicious activity around your apartment. I had a brush with death that day, and I'm so grateful for the time I have now. This could have been written better, but it's hard not to talk about. Halloween has unfortunately never been a big deal out of here in Scotland, and that's always bummed me out because I love Halloween, but after this year I think I'll never be celebrating it again. My street and the next street over had lots of young kids who go out trick-or-treating, so while I was out shopping all day with my mum, we decided to pick up some sweets in case anyone came to our door. I had some plans to go to the cinema to see Origia with my boyfriend, so when we got home, I was getting myself ready to go and my mum was busy putting the shopping away. So when the first row of kids came to the door, I was the first one to answer it. There were children from our street and the next over and some I couldn't recognise as well as an adult at the end of the path, and they were dressed in all black and had some sort of mask covering their face, but it wasn't anything I recognised from the movie or anything. Anyway, they all told me jokes and I gave them their treats and they made their way back down the path and onto the next house. I was about to close the door when I noticed that the guy with the kids was still standing at the end of the path. He hadn't noticed, or he wasn't watching the children either. He was staring right at me and my skin started to crawl when I realised he was just staring at me. I backed slowly into the house and watched him as he raised his hand to wave very slowly at me, and I was about to call out for him when my mum came to the door to make sure I was alright, and he took off in the opposite way from the children. He hadn't been with them at all, and he left as soon as he realised that I wasn't home alone. I was completely freaking out, and I told my boyfriend all about it when he came to the house to pick me up, but I completely forgot about all of it. And when we were watching the movie, when I finally got home, it was really getting late, and trick-or-treating was well and truly over around here. When I got inside, my mum was getting ready to take the dogs out for a walk so that they could do their last minute business, and they would meet my dad on his way home from work, so I was going to be home alone. After my horrible encounter, I don't really like being home alone right now, but it's worse on Halloween, and it always has been. Anyway, I was home alone and grabbed some snacks. I went up to my bedroom and onto my computer so I could do some writing, scroll through Tumblr and listen to music. After my creepy encounter with the guys coming into my house and into my backyard, my dad bought a motion sensor light and attached it to the wall of our house right outside my window. Normally it will go off whenever a cat walks along our fence, but it usually goes off after a couple minutes. I always know when the wires come on because they light up my whole room, giving it where it's placed. And while I was sitting on my computer, the light came on. I ignored it at first because I knew that it was going to go off soon, but 5 minutes later, it still hadn't gone off. So I opened my blind to have a look outside and see what it was. My heart fell out of my chest when I looked out and saw that creep from hours ago still before sitting on the fence waving at my window to keep the light on. His waving slowed down suddenly when he spotted me, and it was all seriously creepy again. I didn't know what to do. I just got flashbacks from before. Luckily, I heard the front door open and my parents come into the house with the dog, so I rushed down the stairs and started screaming at them about the guy on the fence. My dad didn't question me. He just took the dogs and rushed through the house, through the back door open, and ran outside, and I heard, "Get the hell out of my house, you creeper. I'm going to call the police." My dad scared him off, but I convinced him not to call the police because I didn't want to relive the whole thing again. I just wanted to go to sleep and forget all about the whole night. So, to the creepy guy in the mask waving me from the end of my path and sitting on my fence, let's not meet again. I can't go through this again. I was out on Halloween with my girlfriend at the time. We had gone into the city to go to a haunted house, and we were walking back to the train station from the haunted house about 12:30 AM to go home. We were both dressed up like witches, both wearing high heels, and I had my purse with me. My girlfriend's hands were cold, so I was holding her hand and walking very close to her. Yes, these are all important details. The scene was almost like a ghost town. As we were walking back, we saw almost nobody else. We were walking along a mid-road, just going under an overpass, when a car about full of 20-something drove by us, going the opposite way, and a guy hung over the window and shouted, "Ugliest couple ever." Oh, of course, we were both offended, but we just kept walking, and the car drove us off the street. We were 2, maybe 3 blocks from the train station, and this train is in the heart of the city with an elevated highways and railways and overpasses surrounding it, so it tends to be very shadowed, especially at night. We heard the sound of a car engine off to our right, across the street, and it's this point that my girlfriend whispered to me, "It's the same car." I glanced over it, and it was the same car from earlier. The people had gone out the car and were kind of milling about it, but I could tell they were looking at us. I was very nervous at this point, because being both queer and transgender, you face has a lot of potential violence and hate crimes. All the stories about trans people and lesbians and gays being beaten to death were flashing through my head. I was terrified. About a year ago, my dad had told me I had to carry something for self-defense, but instead of a mace or something, he would give me a flashlight. It's about 8 and very sturdy, made of steel, incredibly bright. The thing would be temporarily blind for a good minute, and it had raised beverage edge. It would definitely hurt like an asshole if you were hit with it. I reached into my purse and pulled out the flashlight, gripping it tight in my hand. There was a sound of breaking glass behind us, and both of us looked over our shoulders to see the group of people crossing the street towards us. There was broken glass in the street, and from what I could make out in the streetlights, one of the people was holding a broken beer bottle. I said to my girlfriend, "We need to get out of here now." We ran the remaining 2 blocks to the train station, but not very quickly, because we were in high heels, and the entire time we could hear the group running after us. Heavy steps, maybe 50 foot behind us the whole way. When we got to the train station, we immediately bottled for the brightest area with the most people around and looked around for this group, but they didn't come into the station. It hit me really hard when how close we come to being sadistics. Back in 2008, I had graduated high school, but was still living with my parents, along with my younger brother and sister, who at the time were in high school and junior high. Especially it was Halloween Eve, meaning the next day was Halloween, and we were all asleep in our beds. Now, I have to tell you that although we lived in a nice-ish street, we lived in a town known for gangs and drug dealers and random crazy weirdos. It was a little crazy to hear gunshots and police sirens. It was too close for comfort distance every night, but hey, it was home. Anyway, at 4 AM, I woke up to what sounded like a gunshot from our front porch, followed by shouting like a violent pounding on our front door. Me being curious, but also scared out of my mind, creeped up to the second floor window and peered out into the front yard, and an obstructed view of the porch. This is all I could see, and aside from hearing a regular stream of cursing and more pounding on the door, I had no clue what was going on. For what seemed like hours, but in reality was about 20 minutes. Finally, my brother came bursting into my room asking if I was okay. I told him yes, but in the name of me is going on, he told me this. Some weirdo on a front door he had knocked on, trying to break in. My dad had heard and went to see what was happening. He peered through the glass and saw a man on our porch, to which he asked what was wrong. Without opening and locking the door, the man answered, "They're after me," repeatedly while glancing back behind him. My dad, seeing that there was no one behind him on dimly lit street, he asked him if he would use our phone. He said yes, so my dad grabbed our house phone and handed it to him through the doorway. It had cracked open. The man then tried to push his way in. Thankfully, my dad stopped him and shut and locked the door. Then he proceeded to call the police on the phone the man had opted not to take. That was the story up until the point where my brother came to check on me. At that point, the man had started to scream in profanities, yanking the door handle, the back and forth, violently pounding on the doors. And then I heard the glass shatter. The man had taken the chair from our front porch and thrown it against the window, which led to my parents' room. I don't remember, but I'm pretty sure I was bawling at this point, knowing for sure that he was in our house now. And I remember I woke up to what sounded like a gunshot. I thought I was about to kill my parents first, and then run up to the stairs and kill me and my brother. My mind raced on all these horrible things that could be happening downstairs, when amazingly, the police pulled up right at that moment. They immediately came to the house and detained the man. Apparently he had climbed through the window, cutting himself on the glass, and crawled on all fours into my parents' room and through the kitchen. Finally ended up on our living room floor, where he just laid down and bailed all over our carpet. He didn't have any weapons on him, despite my original theory of him having a gun. He was apprehended before he did anything to anyone in my family, thankfully. We think he was just some druggie who was hallucinating that someone was chasing him. No charges were filed and we never saw that man again. After the police and ambulance left, my dad cleaned up what he could do with the bloody mess and we all went to bed. Unfortunately, all of us have forgot about my little sister who was in the downstairs bedroom in the back of the house. No one had gone to check in on her and nobody told her what happened after it was all over, so we spent the entire night cowering under our blankets thinking something could still be happening. Oops. We all have since apologised to her. I had this one friend when I was growing up I was pretty close with. I call him Carl for the purpose of this story. I recall meeting him when we were first in first grade. I even swear I can remember the way the schoolroom looked as such. Carl and I became fast friends, mostly because we were unlike the most other boys in the class. Particularly, we both liked playing with boy and girl toys for some reason. It was hard to find boys or girls who seemed when we were younger. So, it was just natural, I seemed, and he and I would be friends. Throughout the years growing up, Carl and I did everything together. He would always come over for my birthday as the person who came and the last person to leave. My parents would give him a ride whenever he would one of his birthday presents at a Showbiz Pizza or Chuck E. Cheese. I seem to remember having been to both of them at some point. We were very close, two people friendship, and even when we played things like hide and seek with the other kids, we still didn't connect with the other children the way we connected with each other. As we got around 13 years old, things began to change a little bit, and yeah, I know what you're thinking, boys go through puberty, yada yada yada. But that is not what I'm talking about. Yeah, we talk about girls and I'm sure we had an interest in girls, but there was still things much deeper and much stranger that changes through Carl. We both started watching horror television, horror movies, when we were very young. Our parents wouldn't have been happy about it if they'd known, but we kept it really a secret. Often we spend the night at his house and his bedroom and his parents to go to sleep. Since it was a sleepover, we always stayed up pretty late. Oh, and I don't want you to think Carl's later behaviour had anything to do with watching horror movies. I truly don't believe horror movies, comics, TV shows, and things of that nature make people behave in a certain way. I need to get that out of the way before I continue. The first thing I noticed with Carl is just that he would start playing little practical jokes on his siblings, just some minor things. But he always got a kick out of it when one of them would fall from one of his tricks. He seemed to get a real rush out of it or something. And then he started to up the ante, so to speak. Playing little innocent practical jokes on his family developed into playing jokes on his classmates as well. But it was never like a joke you play on someone and afterwards you all have a good laugh about it. Carl was not just into playing jokes, he was also getting into doing it without getting caught. He never wanted anyone to know that he was indeed he who had done the joke. When we were both 16 though, we decided to go trick-or-treating for Halloween because we've not done it since we were 12. I felt weird walking around begging for candy at that age. Carl had stopped too. It was unusual to see teenagers up to age teen still going around asking for candy, but at age 16, Carl wanted to go trick-or-treating. He insisted that I get a costume, that I go with him. I really didn't want to. I mean, for one thing, I knew the guy. He had suddenly wanted to do things after 4 years. He had to have a reason for it, and that reason was most likely not a good one anyway. But I decided to go anyway. Still, the guy was a friend, so I got myself into a costume. Insisted that it was a costume which no one would be able to tell what it was. I went as a Freddy Krueger costume. Carl's costume was a bit more concealing. He actually wore boots with rifts in them to make himself look taller. He would be in a Michael Myers-like outfit, but with some sort of welder's mask that covered his whole head. It was a weird costume, but it would definitely hide who it was. Suddenly, he just started yelling at me. He was pretty angry at me for something, but he said he was angry at me for not going along with it, and I didn't get what he was, and he kept just telling me to go away. You're not a worthy friend. If you don't go along with what I have to do, you're no friend of mine. And I just walked off. But on the way home, I just thought, what was he on about? Go along with it. The strangest thing, that Cole never seemed to do anything towards me or anything. He just continued to treat me like he had been treating me before this happened. I had a hard time seeing him the same way though. And although we continued to hang out until we graduated high school, yeah, we did make things up, but we weren't as close as we were. We didn't keep in touch with him. After we went away for college, I had no idea what happened to him. I just hope that he never did anything this bad to anyone again. This happened around 20 years ago. It was Halloween night and I was 17 years old. I was talking with a friend on the phone. A friend who had agreed to accompany me and hang out in the graveyard that night. Don't get me wrong, we didn't just walk through there, and that was it. We often find a place dark and nice, a quiet place to sit down, and we would talk for a while, but sometimes it would just be fun to also walk up and down the path. The whole time, there would be occasionally be other teenagers in the graveyard too, which often made it less scary. My friend's name was Josh, and we met up and walked down the graveyard. The streets were already full of children in their costumes trick-or-treating, and there were plenty of adults around trying to scare them too. But we were walked down the street, and there were down a couple of others until we were moving off into the dark. I think one of the things that I liked about the graveyard was the darkness of it all. When you first entered it at night, you couldn't see anything at all, and then your eyes would just slowly begin to adjust to the light. You would be able to see shadows and things like that. Pretty soon you'd be able to see the path better, and you'd be able to see the tombstones better too. And although you soon get used to it, you never got completely unseeable. Things could still surprise you. Josh and I stumbled through a crowd of teenagers who were sitting around the monument and drinking. You would think that I am lame for this, but I had never had my first drink until I was in my mid-20s. We just wanted to get around to the darker and scary part of the graveyard. I'm not sure how long we had been walking around there for. The first saw the scariest thing I had ever seen in my life. At first I thought it was just a shadow, maybe something like the wind blowing on branches of a tree or something, but I wasn't sure. "Hey Josh," I whispered, "did you see something over there?" Josh elbowed me. "Yeah man, I tried to scare the Halloween crap out of me." He laughed. He then looked over to where I had been pointing. Josh jumped and I felt him grab my shoulder. "Damn, you're right," I suddenly whispered. "There was someone over there." We both kept looking in that direction. We were both trying to be quiet as we watched this person. We weren't sure what it was about them, but it was that we could barely make them out. It was like they were dressed in all black or something, and much more different to see that anyone else had been. "Holy hell," Josh said to me, with a hint of wrath in his voice. "It's the Grim Reaper." We followed the figure. After he had given me the pretty good idea of what I was looking at, I was finally able to make out the form. Yeah, it was someone dressed up as the Grim Reaper for Halloween. Anyway, Josh wasn't willing to sit around and wait for me. He got up and followed the person dressed up as the Reaper. He found the whole thing amusing. I guess he wanted to see what was going on. The direction he was walking in was back towards those teenagers that we would seen hanging out. After a few moments, I got up and followed him. The closer I got, the area the teenagers came closer. I noticed something was wrong. The guy in the costume was nowhere to be found. Josh was just standing there in a shocked look on his face. and one of the teenagers giving CPR to another one. I know what you're thinking. You think I believe that the Grim Reaper was real, and one of those teenagers died? You know, for a second I almost believed that. I mean, the whole thing was very, very creepy, but when my eyes adjusted again, I noticed that the Reaper costume laid on the ground beside the boy getting the CPR. The teenagers just had seen us pass earlier and thought they would play a joke on us. One had been dressed up as the Reaper and was following us, trying to scare us. And then he got back to his circle of friends, and he had some sort of attack, whatever it was. And I don't know what it was. It didn't kill him though, although Josh and I didn't really know the group. We did see the one dressed as the Reaper at that school that year. It's one of those things that is really scary in the moment, the very idea of its existence. But with everything that happened that night, it just seemed weird and freaky at the time. Josh had seemed the guy who took the costume off, but because I had only followed from behind, it actually seemed that the Reaper had disappeared and the kid was dying. I was 11 at the time. Trick-or-treating was always done on Halloween on the time. None of it was doing it on a weekday because of the problem of being at a school night, and we always began trick-or-treating around the time that the sun began to set. I suppose that being on a naval base, it was automatically much safer than most other places. I was being kind of nerdy guy, and I also intended to get bullied a bit at school, but I didn't have my friends and we all decided to go out together. We didn't go out with our parents, they stayed home to give out candy, like I mentioned, because it was a Navy base. We all felt rather safe in the situation, so it was the way we went about it. Of course, being a nerdy guy, all my friends were too, and we had the same boys bullying us around, but we also knew that we lived, and we did our best to avoid them as much as possible. On this Halloween, we had been out for an hour or so, walking all over the neighbourhood. I never see people trick-or-treating like that anywhere nowadays. Not in the dark sheer and vast number of children now after dark. And we were getting into a part of the neighbourhood that we weren't familiar with. After that, we slipped out of the Navy base housing and were on a regular neighbourhood street. We weren't supposed to do that, but we were on a quest for more candy. We came up upon this area where there were not as many kids as other places, and when we did, we noticed that there was a group of kids, maybe a year or two older than us, hanging out in the front lawn of this house. We tried to avoid them, especially when we recognised them as kids from our school. They weren't boys or anything like that, but we knew who they were and really didn't want to have much to do with them. One of the boys recognised me and yelled out to me to come over here. I hesitated. I didn't want to go anywhere near them. However, they kept calling me, and we realised that they might get better to go over and see what they want and then ignore them. They weren't boys, but that doesn't mean they wouldn't become boys if they were angry at us for ignoring them. We walked up to them and asked what was going on. They told us that the house they were looking at was haunted. A demon, because of a guy who used to live there, was possessed and murdered his family, and then they dared me to go up and see it. I wanted nothing to do with it, and I told the boys I didn't want to. I was prepared to walk away with my friends. However, before I could, one of the boys grabbed me. He began to push me over to the door of the house. I was terrified and began screaming for help, but the group of older kids imitated my friends from helping me, and he was pushing me up towards the house as quickly as he could. He was telling me things like that the demon was going to drag me into hell with him, and things like that. And then he suddenly let go of me since I was pressing my back against him. I fell backwards, but when I got up and looked around, all of the boys, both my friends and his friends, were running off. I turned and looked at the house and saw someone standing in the doorframe. My first impulse was that it was the demon, and he needed to get up and run. Damn kid, stop! Get off my lawn! I heard the old man in the doorway I don't have candy. That is why I turned the damn lights out. I got up and ran. I wasn't scared of the possible demon or anything. I was scared of this senior citizen. I told my friends about the old man and the misunderstanding, but we never told any of the older kids. Let them think he was a demon after what they did. I hope I never see those kids again, or that man again, for our own safety.